mine is to say a few words about the impact of load shedding on agriculture. And of course, farmers are trained to complain. So I can keep you busy all morning about all the challenges we have with load shedding. But it's not about the impact over the last few months, years. Today it's also not on the impact now. I'm more concerned about the impact on the future of agriculture, which I firmly believe that in the kind of chaos which Quisnel alluded to, history has always provided wonderful solutions. It is in this kind of crisis which beautiful things can be born. You can scroll. On the here and now, I'm afraid that we got to that junction in the history of our country where load shedding is moving over to food shedding. And if you think it is bad to sit in the dark for 4 hours in the evening, try going to sleep hungry. There are all kinds of shortages we already hear of. When one of our country's biggest producers of chicken, Astral, which is a mega corporate farmer, says that they have to cull 10 million chicks on the very day they hatch, just because they do not have the energy certainty to raise them. They are talking of more or less 1/3 of the chicken consumption in South Africa in a month. That is 1/3, that is 10 million less chickens that will go to shelves in shops. And it's not as if we had massive surpluses in chicken. But the shortages is not the major concern. It's the number of farmers who are being knocked out of business, who can no longer make ends meet. Irrigation farmers, farmers who need heating, like in the chicken and the pork industries, farmers who need to maintain the cold chain, such as in the fruit and veggie industries, farmers who are dependent on the lower rates by using the electricity at night time and who have not budgeted to pump during the more expensive daylight hours. Farmers who must do packing, processing. And that is only the losses on the farm. It's not even addressing the value chain losses. You see, food, energy, and water have everything to do with each other. That is the critical nexus for survival. This is where we are now. As farmers, we realized already a few years ago that we need to do something extraordinary to address this crisis. We need to go beyond the framework of what we are used to. And amongst a few partners, ourselves in SAAI, TAU SA, Agri, a number of organizations in the employers space, we said it's no use for each of us to drive our own campaigns and projects to ensure that we get out of this mess. Let's pool our resources. Let's pool our capacity. Let's see how we can make a stronger, a bigger, a higher wave towards a solution. And let's create unity of mind and unity of purpose around this. And very early in this process, simply because of the number of farmers who are calling us every day to say, I've now invested in alternative energy, I have a solar system now, I have batteries. But a few weeks after installations, things have gone wrong. And now the service provider is gone, I can't find him. We soon realized that one of the first things we need to do together is to create some kind of ombuds function. We need to create some kind of protection mechanism for farmers who in a short space of time need to move away from their dependency on Eskom. I can scroll. So when we started to think about solutions, we thought in a few streams. The first one was how to better manage what we have. And what we have is Eskom's generation capacity and Eskom's distribution network. Is it possible to manage the times in which we do not have electricity better? Can we influence that guy with his finger on the switch to rather switch it off when farmers on a certain branch of the network can better afford it? Or can we not? What kind of alternative generating capacity can we create as individuals, as communities on farms and in small towns, and also in a broader network of those who need electricity critically at certain times of the day? We also started to talk about alternative distribution infrastructure. So what if we can generate, and you must understand that as farmers we are quite excited about the prospect of farming with energy too. It opens up opportunities for diversification. Our colleagues in Europe has done it for many years. They farm food, fiber, and energy. For us, it is something new. The idea is new. Actually, we already started in 26 to engage with Eskom, but there were hundreds of excuses why we cannot get access to the grid, why we cannot sell energy into the grid. And we soon realized in these endeavors that the rule for farming with energy and the rules for having alternative sources and distribution networks is exactly the same as the rule on any farm. What you cannot measure, you cannot manage. You must know exactly what you are working with. So these solutions we took to Eskom first. And in our discussions with Eskom, we really ran into brick walls. I later got the impression that they do not want solutions. I really got the impression that they have people who are trained to sit there and listen to you and to say, yes, wonderful ideas, just to keep you busy. But that the outcomes is impossible through that channel. You can unroll. So on the better management of what we have, we could not even get from them the data on exactly what we have. What do we have in terms of hours per day, per week, in which we can rely on the grid? It is as if they do not understand the relevance of that data. So from our side, as in our part of organized agriculture, we did not call for certain branches of the grid to be managed better by say, switching off in the early evening or in the very early morning or in the middle of the day, simply because on every branch of the grid, you will have different kinds of farmers. There are those who need the electricity in the middle of the night because they need eating. And there are those who need it in the middle of the day because they need cooling. And when it's on one branch, you will always put one of the farmers in a disposition. But we don't know what's happening on which part of the grid. So our proposal was, let us help you to gather the data. Let us show you what's happening on the grid. It will not cost you anything. It's a simple exercise for us, not that we are so sure that we will be able to gather all the data, but at least we will know what we don't know. Now we do not even know that. And of course, Eskom said, it's a great idea, and nothing happened afterwards. Eskom is not yet there where we can engage them as civil society to gather the data, process it, and package it in a way in which we can better manage what we have now. Kan maar rol. So we started to talk about the alternative generating and distribution capacity. And here, our purpose is very clear. We need to get as many farmers and businesses in the small and medium space, as many enterprises as possible, as independent from Eskom as possible, as soon as possible. This is one of the reasons we have this conference today. We come to listen to experts to hear what is that route and how can we even expedite the soonest as possible. For that we know we need funding. And a number of speakers have been invited to address the funding part. We need financing. And a number of speakers have been selected to address the financing part. And we need financial models to do it. And you will also hear about those models which have been trialed and tested. We need the most efficient technology available, and we need the best expertise available to get where we want to be. For planning for alternative generating and distribution capacity, we must first realize that we are not alone in this. We are not the first country to hit this brick wall. We found in our deliberations with farmers' organizations elsewhere in the world that there are a number of them who has gone through similar experiences. And we got a number of tips on where to plug in, locally, in the region, and internationally, to learn from countries elsewhere who went through this and who got it right. Hence, the invitation of speakers today who come from Europe and elsewhere in the world. We know that the answer has always been there. For us, a big answer is sun, wind, and other alternatives, which we need to do on our own. We must do it in our own communities. And today, Kali Kriel will also address us on this principle of taking your destiny in your own hands as a community. And then from there, to go big. going green, as we have just heard from the previous speaker, and the wonderful space which has been created internationally for doing just that. Kamarol. In selecting these alternative generating and distribution capacity, once again, the point of departure is that we are not alone, because we can save a lot of school fees by just seeing how others have done it in the solar space. And here we've got a number of really exciting offers from Northern Europe, from Central Europe, from Eastern Europe. Wind, I think of the Dutch. On solar, we will hear from the Spanish. We will hear from the Norwegians. Hydrogen, the offer from the Hungarians. And of course, nuclear. This far out of the normal framework initiative from AfriForum and C5. Kamarol. You can roll it on. And from there we must broaden this alternative generating and distribution capacity and make it work. Now, in many of our deliberations with embassies, and we have really visited a number of embassies, especially our most important trading partners, and we heard from just about every one of them that the technology is there, the will is there to assist, the funding is there. But no country can just engage with private sector in another country in this kind of aid, or with civil society. These are usually government-to-government initiatives. And this is where the problem is. How do you move government to engage in a meaningful way and to create the space, to create the policy environment which is conducive to good investments? The real answer is, of course, that you must take government with you in such a way that even if they don't perform, they will not break you. They will not pull up the handbrakes. So we need a kind of public-private partnership where you can allow one of the partners not to run in the front with you. You must budget for non-performance. Hence, from organized agriculture, we want to call for such a private-public partnership in the form of an energy development corporation, like the ones we had in the 70s and in the 80s in the deep rural areas of South Africa, agricultural development corporations. A vehicle where you can pool expertise and aid and funding and see how fast you can roll out these alternatives. And certainly as farmers, we are ready to do it because we understand it is do or die. There is no alternative for us than to fill the gaps which the national energy provider has left. It is not wondering, should I do it or not? Every farmer knows, if I don't do it, I cannot remain competitive. For those few farmers who have not yet started to make plans, and I know there are many of them, especially on the streaming of this conference, who have switched on their screens today because they need to know how to plan for these alternatives. The fact is just that there is no other way out. than doing it on your own. Some of these initiatives entail an offer, which we will hear more about, from the Spanish to finance 100% of a project if a Spanish company is involved in around 35% of the project. Others is offers more or less in the same format as a cell phone contract, that you sign up and you use your electricity as you would have used your airtime or your data and pay for it monthly. Some of it, like from the Norwegians, is that if they can put up the panels on a portion of land close to a big user, whether it be a small or medium-sized town, a mine or an industrial area, that farmer can have all his electricity for free, as long as they are allowed to sell the surplus then to the bigger user. One of the questions will be around the distribution capacity, the grid. We also have a very important and a very influential speaker on the grid. We are only really concentrated up to now on the crisis in generation. But just as our generation capacity has not been properly maintained, so has our grid. And it's very important to go where the grid is in safe hands. Some municipalities have their own grids. It is possible in certain farming areas to, for rather cheap, develop one's own grid. But that is mostly in the high potential areas where farms are smaller and where the value add is a much bigger portion of the price of the products. It is not possible, for example, in the drier and lower potential areas of our country. But as to what is feasible and not feasible, we cannot just leave it for communities on their own or farmers on their own to see where they can plug in without some kind of coordination, some kind of a bigger game plan. And this is what we need such an energy development corporation for. I've traveled from the airport back to Pretoria last week, and when I switched on my radio in the car, I listened to this interview by a journalist, interview with the CEO of Postnet. And the journalist was asking the CEO, how can it be that your finances look like this? How can it be that as a state-owned enterprise and as a monopoly, you end up with this financial mess you are in? Shouldn't you have privatized to avoid it? And I really felt sorry for the CEO when he very honestly answered. He said, you don't understand that nobody is coming through our doors in the post office to buy stamps anymore, to post a letter or so. There are emails now. Nobody come to us to send a package or to receive a parcel. Nobody comes to us to do business. And this is why we need to close, I can't remember, something like 170 post offices in rural towns. He said, when we wiped our eyes, we were redundant. Nobody needs us anymore. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we can one day listen to a similar interview with the CEO of Eskom?